You don't understand, Nathaniel. If she sees you, everything falls apart. Claire Bennett's voice shook in the cold Manhattan rain as she stood beside the back entrance of Le Claire Maison, her fingers gripping the edge of her gray cardigan so tightly her knuckles turned white. Across from her, Nathaniel Cross looked taller somehow beneath the glow of the restaurant's gold exterior lights, his navy overcoat untouched by the storm, his steel gray eyes unreadable. "I don't even know who you are," he said sharply. "Then stop following me." The words came too fast, too desperate. For a moment, neither of them moved. Taxi lights blurred across the wet street behind them. Somewhere nearby, a siren echoed through Midtown. Claire lowered her gaze first. That was always how these moments ended. "Mommy." The tiny voice cut through the tension like glass cracking in silence. Claire turned instantly. 6-year-old Ellie stood in the doorway clutching her stuffed rabbit against her pink winter coat, blonde curls damp from the mist outside. "I told you to stay inside, sweetheart," Claire whispered, kneeling quickly beside her. But Ellie wasn't looking at her. The little girl stared directly at Nathaniel, completely still. Nathaniel frowned slightly, uncomfortable under the strange intensity of the child's blue eyes. Then Ellie stepped forward slowly, almost carefully, like she recognized him from somewhere impossible. Claire's breathing changed. Tiny, uneven. "Ellie," she said quietly, forcing a smile. "Come here." But the child didn't move toward her mother. She walked straight toward Nathaniel instead. The billionaire instinctively stiffened as the little girl wrapped her small arms around his waist beneath the rain-soaked coat. Then came the whisper that stopped the world. "Dad." Silence. Real silence. Even the traffic outside seemed distant suddenly. Nathaniel froze completely. Claire went pale. The tray beside the service door slipped from her trembling hand and shattered across the pavement with a sharp metallic crash. Restaurant employees turned instantly. A valet stopped mid-step. Inside the dining room, conversations faded beneath the soft piano music. Nathaniel slowly looked down at the little girl holding onto him like she belonged there. His jaw tightened. What did she just say? Claire couldn't answer. Her throat burned too badly. Ellie tilted her head back innocently, blue eyes shining beneath the city lights. "You came back," she whispered softly. Nathaniel stared at the child, then at Claire, and something cold moved through his chest for the first time in years. Because the little girl's eyes looked exactly like his. Claire moved first, almost violently. Ellie let go. Her voice cracked as she pulled the little girl gently back from Nathaniel's coat, forcing a smile that looked painfully fragile beneath the warm restaurant lights spilling onto the sidewalk. "I am so sorry, sir." She gets confused sometimes. But Nathaniel did not answer immediately. He was still staring at Ellie. Really staring now. The child clutched her stuffed rabbit against her chest, while rainwater shimmered on her blonde curls. Blue eyes, pale lashes, small dimple in her left cheek. Something about her face pulled at memories Nathaniel had buried years ago beneath boardrooms, private jets, and 12-hour workdays. "You know me?" he asked quietly. Ellie nodded without hesitation. "Mommy cries when she sees you on television." Claire inhaled sharply. "Ellie." The warning in her voice finally made the little girl lower her gaze. Around them, restaurant employees pretended not to watch. But everyone was watching. The valet suddenly became fascinated with polishing an already spotless black sedan. Two women near the entrance whispered behind champagne glasses. Manhattan loved scandal almost as much as it loved money. Claire felt her pulse hammering beneath her skin. "Please," she said softly to Nathaniel. "She is tired. It has been a long shift." Nathaniel finally looked away from Ellie and focused on Claire again. Really focused this time. Her blonde hair was pinned carelessly now, loose strands falling around a tired face that looked older than 41 should. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. Exhaustion, stress, survival. Yet beneath all of it, he recognized something else. "Have we met before?" The question landed like thunder inside her chest. Claire forced a quick laugh that sounded unnatural even to herself. "No, sir. Too fast." Nathaniel noticed immediately. Billionaire survived by reading hesitation. Fear lies hidden inside tiny pauses. And Claire Bennett suddenly looked terrified. "Mommy," Ellie whispered again, tugging her sleeve. "That is him." Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Him." Claire crouched quickly beside her daughter. "Sweetheart, remember what we talked about? Sometimes people look familiar, and our imagination fills in the rest." Ellie frowned. But he has the same eyes as me. Silence again. Dangerous silence. Nathaniel felt something shift uncomfortably inside him. The little girl was right. Their eyes were almost identical. Cold blue around the edges, lighter near the center. Claire stood abruptly. We should go home. She grabbed her daughter's hand too quickly, almost like fleeing. Nathaniel watched her movements carefully now. The trembling fingers, the pale face, the way she refused to meet his eyes. Then his attention caught on something else. Around Ellie's neck hung a tiny silver necklace partly hidden beneath her coat. A small crescent moon charm. Nathaniel's expression changed instantly. 10 years ago, he had bought that exact necklace from a jewelry shop in Boston during a snowstorm. There had only been one made like it. Claire noticed where he was looking and immediately covered the necklace with Ellie's scarf. Too late. Nathaniel stepped forward slowly. Where did she get that? Claire's lips parted, but no sound came out. Claire's heartbeat became so loud she could barely hear the rain anymore. The silver crescent moon necklace rested against Ellie's scarf for only a second before the little girl instinctively grabbed it again with tiny fingers. Nathaniel stared at it without blinking. That necklace, he said slowly, his voice quieter now, more dangerous somehow. Where did she get it? Claire swallowed hard. It was a gift. From who? She hesitated. That was all it took. Nathaniel noticed every tiny fracture in people. It was how he built an empire worth billions. He could spot uncertainty in a boardroom from 50 feet away. And Claire Bennett looked like a woman standing too close to the edge of something she had hidden for years. Mommy says it belonged to somebody important, Ellie offered innocently. Claire closed her eyes for half a second. Ellie, sweetheart, we need to go. But Nathaniel stepped forward before they could move. Not aggressive, just controlled. Precise. I bought that necklace 10 years ago in Boston. Claire froze completely. Cold rain tapped softly against the black sidewalk around them, while warm golden lights spilled from the restaurant windows behind his shoulders. There was only one made, he continued. I remember because the jeweler engraved something inside. Claire's face lost what little color remained. Nathaniel noticed instantly. Take it off, he said quietly. Nathaniel. For the first time, she said his name without thinking. Both of them realized it at the same moment. Silence crashed down between them. Ellie looked back and forth in confusion. Nathaniel's expression hardened. So we have met before. Claire looked trapped now. Not angry. Not manipulative. Just exhausted. Like someone who had spent years carrying a secret too heavy for one person alone. Please, she whispered. Not here. But Nathaniel was already kneeling slightly in front of Ellie. His expensive coat darkened beneath the rain as he softened his voice toward the little girl. Can I see your necklace, sweetheart? Ellie nodded immediately and lifted it carefully over her curls. Nathaniel turned the tiny crescent moon over in his palm beneath the streetlight. Then he saw it. Small engraved letters inside the silver. CC and NX. His breath stopped. Claire pressed a trembling hand against her mouth. 10 years vanished instantly inside Nathaniel's mind. Boston. Snow falling outside a tiny jewelry shop near Beacon Hill. Claire laughing softly while warming her hands around coffee. 29 years old. Before private security. Before magazine covers. Before becoming the coldest man on Wall Street. You told me you lost it, he said faintly. Claire's eyes filled instantly. I lied. Nathaniel slowly looked up at her again. This time the anger was gone. Something worse replaced it. Confusion. Shock. And beneath both, hope he was suddenly terrified to feel. Inside the restaurant, someone opened the door. Warm jazz music floated briefly into the cold night air. But Nathaniel barely heard it anymore. Because the little girl standing in front of him was beginning to look less like coincidence and more like family. Claire grabbed Ellie's hand tightly. Too tightly. We are leaving. Her voice sounded fragile beneath the rain. Almost breathless now, but Nathaniel rose slowly to his feet and blocked the path toward the sidewalk. Not threatening. Just impossible to ignore. Manhattan traffic reflected across the wet pavement behind him in streaks of gold and white, while steam drifted upward from a nearby subway grate. You lied to me for 10 years, he said quietly. Claire shook her head immediately. No. I disappeared 10 years ago. There is a difference. Nathaniel stared at her, as if trying to rebuild an entire decade from fragments. You never told me there was a child. I tried. The words escaped before she could stop them. Silence. Ellie looked up at her mother in confusion. Mommy. Claire crouched quickly, smoothing rainwater from the little girl's coat sleeve with trembling hands. Sweetheart, go wait inside with Mrs. Parker for 1 minute, okay? Ellie hesitated. But please. Something in Claire's voice finally made the child nod. One of the older hostesses gently led Ellie back toward the restaurant entrance while Nathaniel watched every movement carefully. The moment the door closed behind Ellie, the warmth disappeared. Only Rain remained now. Rain, and 10 years of unanswered questions. Nathaniel stepped closer. You tried. Claire laughed softly then. Not because anything was funny. Because she was too exhausted to cry. I sat in your office lobby for 3 hours, Nathaniel. His expression shifted immediately. What? Your assistant told me you were too important to see me. Nathaniel frowned hard. That does not make sense. Maybe not to you. Claire folded her arms tightly against the cold. But back then you were becoming Nathaniel Cross. Every magazine in New York wanted your face on the cover. Every investor wanted your attention. I was just, she stopped herself. Just what? Claire looked away toward the blurred city lights. A waitress from Brooklyn who got pregnant at exactly the wrong moment. Nathaniel inhaled slowly. He remembered Boston clearly now. The tiny coffee shop near Charles Street. Claire reading paperbacks by the window. The way she laughed quietly instead of loudly like the women in his world. For 6 months, she had been the only peaceful thing in his life. Then his company exploded overnight. Investors, interviews, flights to Singapore and London. Endless pressure. He remembered calling her less, sleeping less, becoming someone colder. Why did you not come again, he asked. Claire's eyes finally met his. Red around the edges now. Because your assistant handed me a check. Nathaniel went completely still. What? $25,000. Her voice cracked. She told me it was generous considering the situation. Rainwater slid slowly down Nathaniel's face as realization began forming piece by piece inside his mind. I never sent money. Claire stared at him for a long moment. Searching, measuring. Then something inside her expression shifted from anger to confusion. Real confusion. You are saying you did not know? Nathaniel's jaw tightened hard enough to ache. Somewhere behind them, thunder rolled softly above the Manhattan skyline. And for the first time that night, Claire Bennett realized the man standing in front of her might have been betrayed too. Nathaniel did not speak for several seconds. Rain continued dripping from the edge of his coat, while headlights swept across the street behind him in soft waves of white and amber. Claire watched something unfamiliar happen to his face. The billionaire who terrified boardrooms suddenly looked lost. Truly lost. Who was the assistant, he finally asked. Claire shook her head slowly. I do not remember her name. Describe her. Tall. Dark hair. Red lipstick. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Vanessa Cole. His former chief of staff. The woman who managed his entire schedule during the years his company exploded into a billion-dollar empire. Efficient. Ruthless. Loyal to profits above people. Suddenly memories returned in sharp fragments. Vanessa canceling personal calls. Vanessa saying, distractions are dangerous right now. Vanessa deciding who mattered enough to reach him. Nathaniel felt sick. She told you I did not want the baby? Claire laughed bitterly. No. She never called Ellie a baby. Her voice trembled harder now. She called her a problem. Nathaniel's expression darkened instantly. Claire continued before emotion could stop her. She said men like you protected their image at all costs. She said I would ruin your future. Thunder rolled again somewhere above the city skyline. Nathaniel looked away toward the traffic for a moment. Jaw tight with anger he was struggling to control. Not at Claire. At himself. Because deep down, he knew there had been truth in Vanessa's confidence. Back then he had been obsessed with becoming untouchable. Faster. Bigger. Richer. He remembered firing people for slowing meetings by 5 minutes. He remembered sleeping in his office for 3 straight days during a merger. He remembered choosing ambition every single time. Claire studied him carefully beneath the rain. You would have believed her, she whispered. Nathaniel did not answer. That silence became answer enough. Claire nodded faintly, almost to herself. Exactly. For a moment, only the sound of rain existed between them. Then the restaurant door opened again, and Ellie peeked outside holding her stuffed rabbit against her cheek. Warm light spilled around her small frame. Mommy, are we going home? Claire immediately softened. Every hard edge inside her disappeared the second she looked at her daughter. Soon, sweetheart. Ellie looked at Nathaniel again with innocent curiosity. Why are you sad? The question landed harder than any accusation. Nathaniel stared at the little girl. No board member had ever looked at him that openly. No investor had ever spoken to him without fear or agenda. But this child did. Completely. I think, Nathaniel said slowly, because I missed something important. Ellie tilted her head slightly, thinking about that. Then she walked closer and held up her stuffed rabbit. Mr. Buttons gets sad too. Claire almost smiled despite herself. Nathaniel looked at the tiny worn rabbit with one missing button eye and suddenly imagined birthdays he never attended, school plays he never saw, bedtime stories another man never told because there had been no man there at all. His chest tightened painfully. Ellie held the rabbit toward him again. You can hold him if you want. Nathaniel carefully took the stuffed toy into his large hands like it was something fragile enough to break. And somewhere deep inside the coldest man on Wall Street, something finally did. The rain finally began to soften into a cold mist by the time Claire and Ellie stepped onto the downtown subway platform 30 minutes later. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while tired commuters stood in silence beneath faded advertisements and dripping pipes. Claire wrapped her old gray coat tighter around Ellie's shoulders as the little girl leaned sleepily against her side. "Mommy," Ellie whispered, "is he really my dad?" Claire's steps slowed instantly. Around them, a train roared through the station without stopping, wind sweeping through the tunnel hard enough to move strands of her blonde hair across her face. She looked down at her daughter carefully. Ellie's blue eyes were still full of innocent hope. No fear, no confusion, just curiosity. Claire crouched beside her on the empty platform bench. "Why would you ask that?" Ellie shrugged softly. "Because when he looked at me, it felt like he already loved me." Claire nearly broke right there beneath the ugly subway lighting. Instead, she forced a trembling smile and brushed a curl away from Ellie's forehead. "Sweetheart, sometimes adults have complicated feelings." Ellie considered that seriously for a moment. Complicated means sad. Claire looked away toward the dark tunnel. Sometimes. The arriving train screeched into the station, with sparks flashing briefly beneath the wheels. Claire helped Ellie aboard, and they sat near the back of the nearly empty subway car beneath cold white lights. Outside the windows, Manhattan blurred by in streaks of darkness and graffiti-covered walls. Ellie slowly fell asleep against Claire's shoulder, clutching Mr. Buttons beneath one arm. Claire stared silently at the reflection in the subway glass. 41 years old. 2 jobs. 4 hours of sleep most nights. Bills stacked beside overdue notices in a tiny Queens apartment. And now, Nathaniel Cross had walked back into her life like a ghost she never truly escaped. Her phone suddenly vibrated inside her coat pocket. Unknown number. Claire froze before answering quietly. "Hello. You should have told me." Nathaniel's voice filled the line, low and controlled, but no longer cold. Claire closed her eyes instantly. "How did you get my number?" "I own half the buildings in Manhattan, Claire." A pause followed. Softer this time. "Finding you was never the hard part." Claire looked down at Ellie sleeping peacefully beside her. "What do you want?" Nathaniel did not answer immediately. She could hear city traffic faintly in the background on his end. Maybe he was still outside the restaurant. Maybe he had not moved at all. "I keep thinking about what she said." Claire's throat tightened. "Nathaniel." She thought I came back for her. The words sounded shattered now. Quietly shattered. Claire leaned back against the subway seat as exhaustion finally began sinking into her bones. "She does not know the truth." "Then tell me." The train rattled loudly through another tunnel while passengers swayed gently beneath the dim lights. Claire stared at her daughter again, at the tiny hand still clutching the sleeve of her coat, even while asleep. "The truth," Claire whispered carefully, "is that I spent 6 years trying to convince myself Ellie did not need you." Silence answered her. Heavy silence. Then Nathaniel spoke again, softer than she had ever heard him before. "And did you?" Claire looked down at the sleeping child between them. Her voice almost disappeared when she answered. "No." Claire barely slept that night. The old radiator inside her small Queens apartment hissed unevenly, while pale blue dawn light crept through cracked blinds across the living room floor. Ellie slept curled beneath a faded yellow blanket on the pull-out couch, one arm wrapped around Mr. Buttons. Claire stood quietly, near the tiny kitchen counter staring into untouched coffee gone cold almost an hour earlier. Nathaniel's voice still echoed inside her mind. "And did you?" She hated that one question could undo years of emotional survival. Outside, New York slowly woke beneath gray winter skies. Car horns, distant sirens, the smell of rain trapped between concrete buildings. Claire checked the clock. 6:23 in the morning. In less than an hour, she needed to wake Ellie, prepare breakfast, catch the 7:15 subway, and make it downtown before the breakfast shift began. Real life did not pause for emotional disasters. Her phone buzzed again. Claire froze instantly when she saw the unknown number. Same number as last night. She hesitated before answering softly. What now? I need to see her again. Nathaniel sounded exhausted. Not polished. Not composed. Just tired. Claire leaned against the kitchen counter and lowered her voice so Ellie would not wake. You cannot just appear in her life overnight. She is already in mine. The words came immediately. Honest. Raw. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Nathaniel. I spent half the night looking at old photographs. Silence. I found pictures of Boston. Claire's chest tightened painfully. That was a long time ago. Not for me anymore. Through the phone, she could hear movement in the background. Elevators. Voices. Traffic far below. He was already working. Of course he was. Men like Nathaniel Cross built companies before sunrise. There is something else, he said quietly. Claire felt dread instantly. What? I had my legal department investigate Vanessa Cole. Claire straightened immediately. Nathaniel, no. She resigned 8 years ago with a $2 million settlement. His voice hardened slightly now. 3 former employees filed internal complaints against her. Claire stared silently at the peeling wallpaper in her tiny kitchen. Complaints about what? Nathaniel paused. Manipulating access to executives. Destroying messages. Accepting payments from investors, trying to influence company decisions. Claire slowly sat down at the small kitchen table because her knees suddenly felt weak. You are saying she kept people from you professionally too? Yes. The words sounded heavy. Guilty. Claire covered her mouth with trembling fingers. For 10 years, she had carried anger like armor. Anger kept her moving when rent was late. Anger helped her survive lonely nights and double shifts, and seeing Nathaniel's face on magazine covers while she clipped grocery coupons at midnight. But now, the story was changing. Claire, Nathaniel said softly. If I had known about Ellie, she interrupted instantly before emotion could swallow her whole. Do not. It is the truth. The truth does not change the past. Silence filled the line again. Then a sleepy little voice drifted across the apartment. Mommy. Claire turned quickly. Ellie stood in the hallway rubbing one eye, blonde curls messy from sleep. Who are you talking to? Claire looked at the phone in her hand. Her pulse quickened. On the other end of the line, Nathaniel stopped breathing completely. Because for the first time in his life, he was about to hear his daughter say good morning. Claire's fingers tightened around the phone as Ellie walked barefoot across the apartment floor, still half asleep beneath the pale morning light. The little girl rubbed her eyes slowly and climbed onto one of the worn kitchen chairs beside the tiny table. Who is it? She asked softly. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. On the other end of the line, Nathaniel remained completely silent. Waiting. Listening. Claire finally forced herself to breathe. It is someone Mommy used to know. Ellie leaned curiously toward the phone. The sad man. Nathaniel shut his eyes instantly when he heard that. Claire noticed the faint change in his breathing through the speaker. Sweetheart. He looked lonely. Ellie continued innocently while swinging her small legs beneath the chair. Like people at the subway station. Claire felt emotion rise dangerously inside her chest. Because children notice truths adults spent years hiding. Nathaniel spoke carefully now, his deep voice quieter than before. Good morning, Ellie. The little girl's eyes widened immediately. You remember my name. Nathaniel looked out. Through the massive glass windows of his Manhattan office 43 stories above the city. Normally mornings here were filled with meetings, assistants, stock reports, and billion-dollar negotiations. Today, none of it mattered. I do, he answered softly. Ellie smiled sleepily. Mommy says remembering names means somebody cares about you. Claire looked down instantly, embarrassed. Nathaniel's expression changed almost painfully at those words. For several seconds nobody spoke. Warm sunrise light slowly crept across Claire's tiny kitchen while steam rose from an old radiator beside the window. Finally, Ellie tilted her head. Are you rich? Claire nearly choked on air. Ellie. But Nathaniel surprised both of them with a quiet laugh. Real laughter. Tired. Human. Unfamiliar even to himself. A little, he admitted. Ellie seemed unimpressed by the answer. Do rich people eat waffles? Nathaniel blinked. I suppose so. Good. Ellie nodded seriously. Because mommy burns pancakes when she is stressed. Claire covered her face instantly while Nathaniel laughed again, fuller this time. For one strange moment, the years between them disappeared. No billion-dollar towers. No lies. No heartbreak. Just a sleepy child talking about breakfast beneath soft morning sunlight. Then Ellie suddenly asked the question Claire feared most. Why did you not come back? Silence. Heavy silence. Nathaniel looked down slowly at the phone in his hand. Across Manhattan, Claire stopped breathing. Even Ellie sensed the shift. Nathaniel's voice lowered almost to a whisper. I did not know where you were. Ellie considered that answer carefully. Mommy looked for you. Claire's eyes filled instantly. Ellie, she cried after she watched your interviews on television. The little girl continued softly. Sometimes she turned the television off really fast. Nathaniel sat down slowly at his desk because his legs no longer felt steady. The skyline behind him blurred slightly. Claire pressed trembling fingers against her lips, ashamed and exposed in a way she had avoided for years. Then Ellie smiled gently into the phone with the simple kindness only children carried naturally. It is okay though, she whispered. You found us now. And somewhere inside Nathaniel Cross, the walls he spent 20 years building began falling apart completely. 3 weeks later, soft snow drifted across Queens in slow white spirals as Claire stood near the back row of the elementary school auditorium, nervously smoothing wrinkles from Ellie's blue sweater. Warm yellow lights glowed above the small stage while parents filled folding chairs with paper coffee cups and winter coats draped across their laps. Children laughed backstage behind the red curtain. Somewhere nearby, a piano played the wrong notes during rehearsal. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary people. Yet Claire's hands still trembled slightly, because she had not told Ellie he was coming. Mommy. Ellie whispered excitedly beside her. Do you think he remembered? Claire opened her mouth carefully. Sweetheart. But then the auditorium doors opened quietly at the back of the room. Nathaniel Cross stepped inside wearing a charcoal wool coat dusted with snow, no security team behind him, no assistant carrying schedules, no expensive arrogance filling the room before him. Just a tired 52-year-old man searching nervously through a crowd for one little girl. Ellie gasped so loudly several parents turned around. He came back. Before Claire could react, Ellie ran down the aisle beneath the warm auditorium lights, blonde curls bouncing behind her. Nathaniel saw her instantly. And this time, he smiled before she even reached him. A real smile. The kind money could never buy. Ellie wrapped her arms around him tightly, while Nathaniel knelt and hugged her back without hesitation, eyes closing briefly like he still could not believe she was real. Around them, nobody recognized the billionaire from magazine covers. They only saw a father holding his daughter like something sacred. Claire stood frozen near the back wall watching the scene through sudden tears she could no longer hide. Nathaniel looked up at her over Ellie's shoulder. No words passed between them. None were needed anymore. The school principal announced the start of the winter performance as families slowly found their seats beneath the glowing stage lights. Nathaniel hesitated only a second before looking toward the empty chair beside Claire, quietly asking permission without speaking. Claire stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Small, careful, but real. Nathaniel sat beside her as the auditorium lights dimmed softly around them. For several minutes, they watched children sing badly into microphones while parents recorded shaky videos on their phones. Normal life. Messy life. Beautiful life. Halfway through the performance, Ellie stepped onto the stage beneath a single warm spotlight. She looked nervous at first, until her eyes found both of them sitting together in the crowd. Then she smiled, bright enough to light the whole room. Nathaniel felt his throat tighten painfully as applause filled the auditorium around them. Claire quietly wiped away tears beside him. And for the first time in 10 years, neither of them felt alone anymore. Sometimes life does not heal people with grand speeches or impossible miracles. Sometimes healing begins with a child who simply refuses to stop loving. And sometimes, the quietest people carry the deepest truths all along. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below, and tell us, have you ever lost someone important, only to find them again when you least expected it?